Hey, what's going on everyone? Rido here. Today, I've got a beginner's guide for one of the toughest bosses in Dark Souls 3, Darkeater Midir. So why do I call it a beginner's guide? Well, that's because I think that with this strategy, even the less experienced Dark Souls players can beat this feared boss. How do I know that? Well, actually, I'm somewhat of a beginner myself as well. Or at least, I'm not nearly as experienced as some other people you see on YouTube. Still, with this strategy, I was able to beat the boss in about an hour. And so I believe that you can do that too. Alright, let's get into it. Darkeater Midir is a boss with lots and lots of health, while also having the potential to kill you in one hit. So how do you deal with that? Intuitively, you might want to deal as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time, to cope with his huge amount of health. However, unless you're very experienced, I don't think that's the way to go. Instead, I think you should go for a strategy that minimizes the risk of getting killed. So what is the optimal place to be when facing such an enormous dragon? I think you should be right behind him, next to his tail to be more precise. What you should do is you should run towards Midir. Hit his head once or maybe twice if you have the opportunity, and then run underneath him, to his tail. Often, if you go underneath him, he breathes fire on the ground, but if you run to about the middle of his tail, so the point where his tail starts to become thinner, the fire can't hit you. While he is breathing fire, you also have the opportunity to hit his tail a few times. Make sure though that you're standing far enough, otherwise you will get hit by the fire. After that, he will turn around, and you simply repeat what you just did. Run towards Midir, hit his head if you can, run underneath him to his tail, and hit his tail a few times. That's basically all you have to do to kill him. Now hold on, of course it's not that easy. Midir won't go down without a fight. So let's take a look at all his attacks, so you know what to expect and how to dodge everything. First off, he can spray fire while rushing forward. I find this attack pretty easy to dodge. What I do is I roll towards him at a slight angle. This way, you can almost always get behind him without getting hit. Next up, he also has a fire breathing attack where he sprays fire forward while standing still. This attack is not dangerous if you're standing very close to him. You can simply get underneath Midir and you won't get hit. This also gives you plenty of time to heal or hit him a few times. Now if you're not able to get underneath him, then you better make sure that you roll away as far away as possible, beyond the reach of his fire. As mentioned before, since you will often run underneath Midir, he will also spray fire on the ground beneath his head. To avoid this fire, simply run to his tail, and you should be safe. Just make sure that you don't underestimate the range, because you can get hit, even behind him. Sometimes, he will combine his fire with a dark laser beam. This deals massive damage in a very wide range, but again, as long as you stay next to his tail, you should be safe. Apart from his fire attacks, he also has some physical attacks. Your main concern should be the tail whip. With the strategy we're using, this is actually his most dangerous attack. If you're standing behind Midir, mainly if you're standing just behind his legs, he will often swing his tail, dealing high physical damage. It's actually quite easy to dodge it with a well-timed roll, but only if you know that it's coming. Therefore, you have to pay attention to his tail. First it goes up, completely off the ground, and then it goes down and to the side. Once you see it go to the side, you know that his tail will swing shortly after that. Wait a fraction of a second and roll to dodge it. If you practice this a bit, it's actually quite easy to get the timing right. But what makes it dangerous is that you can sometimes forget about this attack, especially towards the end of the fight, when it gets more chaotic. So if you're standing behind him, always pay attention to the movement of his tail. If you're standing close in front of Midir, or close to his head, he can do a variety of different moves. Firstly, he can do some claw swipes. Furthermore, he can hit or even grab you with his jaws. Also, he can pound on the ground. Lastly, he can roar and then dash forward. All these attacks deal quite a lot of damage, so I really prefer to stick to the strategy and get underneath and behind him. That way, you won't have to deal with these attacks very often. Keep them in mind though, because as I said, you may want to hit his head once or twice to deal some extra damage before running to his tail. but as long as you don't attack more often than that, you should be able to simply dodge these attacks and safely get behind him. Next up is another fire attack. This time, Midir attacks from the air. If you see that Midir jumps up and flies away, quickly turn around and run towards him at a slight angle. You don't have to roll, just run. Once he passes you and you get behind his line of fire, you're safe. Alright, once you get to phase 2, Midir will do a few more attacks. First off, he can do an AoE strike. If you see that he is charging and dark stuff rises from the ground, he's about to do this attack. Now this should be easy to avoid. Just roll away from him once you see that dark energy rising. Furthermore, he can also summon a lot of projectiles, which first rise from the ground and then pursue you. To dodge these, just roll around Midir. Midir actually blocks his own projectiles, so if you're close to him, most of these projectiles won't get to you. Lastly, he can do a focused dark beam. This is perhaps his most powerful attack. He basically shoots a big laser in a wide area in front of him. But again, you're safe if you're standing behind him, next to his tail. What's more, after this attack, Midir is exhausted for a while, giving you a few seconds to deal some damage, while Midir lays still. Now the last thing I want to mention is that you should only use Estus flasks if you're sure that Midir isn't going to attack or hit you. So this could be when he's spraying fire on the ground and you're not within his range. Or for example when Midir is turning around. You may feel uneasy when you're low on health, but it's important that you only heal when you actually have the opportunity. Alright, so that's it for this guide. Remember, run towards Midir, hit his head if you can, run underneath him to his tail, and hit his tail a few times. Do this again and again, while paying attention to his attacks, and you will eventually kill this fearsome beast. So this is going to be the end of the commentary. I hope you learned something useful, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching. I am Rido, and I wish you all a very good day.